In episode 2, Sophia takes a deeper plunge into the dark realities of Olivia's marriage, while also struggling with her own identity and dreams. Will she continue to turn a blind eye, or will she finally find the courage to intervene? As the tension grows, so does the resolve in Sophia's heart. This fight is no longer just about survival, it's about reclaiming her voice. Her biggest challenge, however, was ironing. Olivia's wardrobe was filled with expensive garments, and Sophia had to ensure each one was flawlessly pressed. No creases, no imperfections. A single wrinkle could invite Olivia's sharp criticism. And Olivia was relentless. No matter how diligently Sophia worked, Olivia always found something to complain about. A missed button, a slightly crooked fold. Small, insignificant details became ammunition for her daily barrage of harsh words. Yet, rather than resentment, Sophia felt something unexpected. Pity. Because as she moved about the house, observing its inhabitants, she began to understand something about Olivia's life. Alara, Olivia's mother-in-law, treated her with cold indifference, often regarding her with veiled disdain. Though she never outright insulted Olivia, the tension in her glances spoke volumes. Then there was Julian. Unlike his mother, Julian did not treat Olivia cruelly, but there was a noticeable distance between them. He spoke to her only when necessary, his tone flat, his eyes void of warmth. There was no affection, no tenderness. It became increasingly clear to Sophia that this house was brimming with silent conflict. The resentment Olivia poured onto her seemed to stem from something much deeper than mere dissatisfaction with a laundry worker. And so, instead of hating her employer, Sophia found herself trying to understand her. One morning, Sophia rose before dawn, stretching the stiffness from her limbs before heading to the laundry room. She had barely started sorting the clothes when the sharp clack of heels echoed down the hallway. "Buy my supplements at the drugstore," Alara ordered as she stepped inside, her voice clipped. "Yes, ma'am, I'll go as soon as I finish this load of laundry," Sophia replied. Alara's lips pressed into a thin line, "Go now, and hurry up." Sophia hesitated for a split second before setting aside her task. There was no room for negotiation. Taking the list and money Alara handed her, she hurried out. The sun had just begun its slow ascent when she reached the pharmacy. She handed the clerk Alara's list and waited as they gathered the items. That was when she saw him. Julian. Sophia froze, but he wasn't alone. Beside him walked a woman, tall, stunningly beautiful, with an air of effortless elegance. She leaned against him, her fingers curled possessively around his hand, her smile filled with an intimacy that left no room for doubt. They weren't just friends. They weren't just acquaintances. Julian was in love with someone else. Sophia watched as the two strolled leisurely down the street, completely at ease in each other's company. A small laugh escaped the woman's lips, and Julian responded with a rare, genuine smile, one Sophia had never seen him give Olivia. Suddenly, everything made sense. The emotional distance, the hollow marriage, the barely there conversations. Sophia swallowed hard, dragging her gaze away as the clerk returned with Alara's items. She paid, collected the bag, and forced herself to walk out without looking back. By the time she returned home, her mind was still racing. She found Alara seated in the living room, flipping through a magazine with an air of effortless disinterest. Sophia stepped forward and silently handed her the supplements. Alara took them without so much as a glance, barely acknowledging her presence. But Sophia remained standing, her pulse thrummed with the weight of what she had seen. She knew it wasn't her place to interfere in her employer's personal affairs. She was merely a laundry worker, a stranger in their world. And yet, if anyone had the power to put an end to Julian's affair, it was Alara. Taking a slow, steadying breath, Sophia gathered her courage. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you." Alara didn't even look up. "What is it?" she asked, her tone laced with boredom. Sophia clenched her fists at her sides, willing her voice to remain steady. "Your son, he's seeing another woman. I saw Mr. Julian earlier at the pharmacy," Sophia began, her voice unsteady. "He was with another woman." Alara barely reacted. She didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't even blink. It was as if Sophia had commented on the weather rather than exposed her son's infidelity. "Ma'am, it was obvious they were a couple," Sophia pressed, struggling to keep her voice firm. "Maybe you should talk to him. What he's doing is wrong." At that, Alara finally moved. She raised her head, her gaze locking onto Sophia's with a cold intensity that sent a chill down the younger woman's spine. "So what if my son has another woman?" she asked, her tone flat, devoid of concern. Sophia faltered. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "But ma'am, he's still married to Mrs. Olivia," she reasoned. "If they have problems, they should talk it out, not—" Ilara cut her off with a sharp, dismissive glare. "Aren't you just the laundry help?" she said icily. "Why are you being so nosy, Sophia? It's not your job to meddle in my son's affairs. Let him do what he wants." Sophia opened her mouth to respond but found herself speechless. She had expected denial, shock, maybe even anger toward Julian, but not this. Not indifference. The realization struck her hard. Ilara knew. She had always known, and she simply didn't care. A bitter taste coated Sophia's tongue. For the first time, she felt something close to hatred toward the woman standing before her. Late that night, the house was cloaked in silence when Sophia was abruptly jolted awake. A scream tore through the mansion. She sat up, her breath hitching. Another cry followed, raw and full of anguish. "Olivia!" Sophia's pulse pounded in her ears. She scrambled out of bed, yanking open her door. The muffled sound of a heated argument echoed from upstairs, each word sharp and venomous. She hurried toward the kitchen, where she spotted Ilara standing by the sink, sipping a glass of water as if nothing were amiss. "Ma'am Ilara," Sophia gasped, her heart hammering. "What's going on upstairs? It sounds like Mrs. Olivia is screaming." Ilara took her time finishing her drink before finally setting the glass down. She turned to Sophia, her expression unreadable. "Go back to your room, Sophia," she said, her voice as cold as the marble countertops. "Pretend you hear nothing if you want to keep your job in this house." With that, she walked away, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving Sophia frozen in place. The screams only grew louder. Something inside Sophia snapped. Ignoring Ilara's warning, she spun on her heels and dashed toward the staircase. Each step she took was fueled by a mix of terror and resolve. At the top of the stairs she hesitated. She could hear Olivia sobbing now, her voice thick with desperation. A loud crash followed, the sound of something shattering against the floor. Sophia's breath hitched. She pushed the door open and froze. Olivia lay sprawled on the cold floor, tears streaking her face, her body curled inward as though shielding herself. A broken vase lay beside her, shards of glass glinting under the dim light. Towering over her was Julian. His face was twisted with rage, his entire frame tense, his chest rising and falling with rapid, heavy breaths. Then he moved. He lifted his foot, and Sophia realized with horror that he was about to kick Olivia again. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She lunged forward. "Stop it, sir," Sophia cried, lunging forward and grabbing Julian's arm in desperation. He turned on her with a snarl, his face dark with fury. With a violent shove, he sent her sprawling onto the floor beside Olivia. "Stay out of this, you meddling laundry worker," he spat. His eyes blazed with contempt as he towered over them. "Actually, the two of you are perfect for each other, both worthless." Without another word, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls seemed to shake. Sophia pushed herself up, her palms stinging from the impact. Her gaze landed on Olivia, whose body trembled with silent sobs. Dark bruises were already forming on her arms, stark against her pale skin. Sophia's chest tightened. "Ma'am Olivia, let me get something for your wounds," she said gently, blinking back tears. "We should treat them before they get worse." Before she could move, Olivia shoved her away with surprising force. "Get out," she hissed, her voice raw with pain and humiliation. "You're just the laundry girl. You have no right to interfere in my marriage." Sophia froze, her heart hammering. "But ma'am—" "Leave!" Olivia screamed, her eyes flashing with something between rage and desperation. Sophia wanted to argue, to stay and help, but she realized the harsh truth. Some wounds couldn't be healed by those who weren't ready to be saved. Swallowing her frustration, she stood slowly, casting one last look at Olivia before walking toward the door. The moment she stepped out, the door slammed shut behind her. The next morning, Sophia woke early, still unsettled from the previous night's events. As she stepped out of her small room, the comforting clatter of kitchen activity greeted her. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling eggs filled the air. Inside, she spotted Serena, one of the senior housekeepers, bustling around the stove, flipping slices of bread on a pan. "Serena, let me help you." Sophia offered, grabbing a knife to chop vegetables. Serena shot her a grateful smile. Thanks, Sophia. Cooking for this household is no joke, especially breakfast. Everyone wants their meal just right. For a few minutes they worked in companionable silence, the rhythmic sounds of chopping and frying filling the space. But Sophia couldn't push down the turmoil swirling inside her any longer. "Mate, can I ask you something?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Serena paused, glancing at her curiously. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Sophia hesitated before speaking, but the question had been gnawing at her since last night. "Why does Mr. Julian hurt Mrs. Olivia?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with frustration. Serena exhaled, setting down the spatula. A shadow passed over her face. "Because Mrs. Olivia is always suspicious of him now," she murmured, her tone cautious. "She doesn't trust him anymore. She questions everything he does. They fight constantly." Sophia's brows furrowed. "But Mr. Julian really does have another woman," she said, dismayed. Serena's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "How did you find that out? You're new here," she asked, her voice low with intrigue. "I saw him with another woman the other day," Sophia confessed, her voice laced with disbelief. "They were really sweet together, holding hands, leaning into each other like a real couple. Then, when I brought it up to Mama Laura, she completely dismissed it, told me to mind my own business." Serena let out a heavy sigh, shaking her head. "Well, there you have it. Mrs. Olivia has every reason not to trust him. Even so, that doesn't justify what he's doing to her," Sophia muttered, her hands tightening into fists. "No matter what's happened between them, Mr. Julian has no right to lay a hand on her." Serena nodded slowly but remained quiet, as if there was something more weighing on her mind. She hesitated for a moment before finally speaking again. "To be honest, I do feel sorry for Mrs. Olivia," she admitted. "If it hadn't been for her, none of what Julian and Alara have now would even exist." Sophia frowned. "What do you mean?" Serena leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Mrs. Olivia used to work overseas, in the Middle East. She was a laundry worker in a palace. Spent years there. She always said her employers were kind, and when her contract ended, the king gave her a fortune, an amount of money you'd never expect for someone in her position." Sophia's mouth parted in shock. "Seriously?" Serena nodded. "When she came back to the States, she used that money to start a business. Then she married Mr. Julian. From that point on, he was the one managing her company." Serena paused, her eyes dark with an emotion Sophia couldn't quite place. "Everything they have now, this house, their investments, their entire lifestyle, it all came from Mrs. Olivia." A heavy weight settled in Sophia's chest. She had never imagined Olivia's story would be like this. She had given so much, her years, her labor, her wealth, only to be repaid with betrayal and cruelty. Sophia thought Serena was done. But after a brief silence, she continued. "There's one more thing," Serena added carefully. "Mrs. Olivia, she can't have children. Maybe that's why Mr. Julian is looking for someone else, someone who can give him an heir." Sophia's jaw clenched. "8. That still doesn't make it right. It doesn't give him an excuse to cheat, and it sure as hell doesn't justify him hurting her." Serena sighed, but this time she had no response. With every piece of the puzzle Sophia uncovered, her heart ached more for Olivia. She had sacrificed everything, placed her trust and love in Julian's hands, and in return she had been abandoned, humiliated, and abused. It was impossible to understand how she endured it. And yet, she did. Every single day. Days passed, and Sophia's heart grew heavier with each one. Every night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Olivia's screams echoed through the upper floors, shattering the silence like glass. The desperate pleas for mercy, the sickening thud of a body slamming against the walls or floor, the muffled sobs that followed. It was always the same. She knew Julian was behind it all, and yet she did nothing. Not because she didn't want to, because she was afraid. Afraid of getting thrown out. Afraid of what Julian might do to her next, afraid that if she stepped in, things would only get worse for Olivia. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself to stay out of it, the guilt gnawed at her. One restless evening, unable to find peace in the suffocating darkness of her small room, Sophia made a decision. She reached under her pillow and pulled out her phone, the one she had kept hidden along with a spare SIM card. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. After a few rings, the familiar voice of Nanny Sad came through. "Hello? Nanny Sad here?" Sophia's chest tightened at the warmth in her voice. She had missed her more than she realized. "Nanny, it's me, Sophia," she whispered. A brief silence, then a gasp. "Sophia, is that really you?" Nanny Sad's voice shot up with excitement, a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Yes, Nanny, it's me. How are you?" "Don't worry about me, I'm fine, but how about you? How are things over there? Are you coming home soon?" she asked in one hurried breath. Sophia exhaled slowly. "I'm okay, but I'm not going back until Dad realizes he can't control me." A heavy sigh came from the other end. "Sophia, your dad is turning the city upside down looking for you," Nanny Sad said, her voice laced with concern. "He barely sleeps, drives around all night, checking with every friend you've ever had. He even hired private investigators, that's how desperate he is." Sophia clenched the phone tighter, her stomach twisting into knots. How long until Mr. Anderson found her? How long until he showed up outside Olivia's house? She opened her mouth to respond. A sudden, piercing scream rang through the house. Sophia bolted upright. Olivia heard cries were louder this time, raw with agony, filled with a terror that made Sophia's blood run cold. Raw on the other end of the call, Nanny Sad gasped. "What was that?" she asked, alarmed. "Was that someone screaming? Sophia? What's going on over there?" Sophia's throat tightened. She couldn't answer. She knew if she told Nanny Sad the truth, she would beg her to leave, and Sophia wasn't ready to go, not until she knew Olivia would be safe. "Sophia, are you still there?" "Nanny, She hesitated, her heart hammering in her chest. Then, before she could lose her resolve, she whispered, "I have to go now. Please take care." And with that, she ended the call, shutting her eyes against the guilt clawing at her chest. Sophia trembled as another scream pierced the silence, louder, more desperate than before. Her stomach twisted. Nearly every night, Julian unleashed his rage on Olivia, leaving behind fresh bruises and deeper wounds, the kind that festered beneath the surface. And every night, Sophia did nothing, but tonight, something inside her shifted. She realized that if she kept turning a blind eye, if she kept telling herself it wasn't her place to interfere, then something truly unspeakable might happen. A few agonizing minutes passed, and then, silence. Sophia strained her ears, listening. No more cries, no sounds of struggle. The house held its breath. So lowly, she pushed off her thin blanket and crept to the door, easing it open just enough to peer into the dimly lit hallway. She saw Julian. His steps were hurried, his face obscured by shadows as he stormed down the stairs. Without hesitation, he yanked open the front door and disappeared into the night. Sophia let out a shaky breath. Her thoughts flew to Olivia. Surely she was lying somewhere in that room again. Bruised, bleeding, broken. Sophia's fingers curled into fists. No more hesitating, no more standing by. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbing a small plastic basin and filling it with warm water. Her hands shook as she gathered a washcloth, antiseptic wipes, betadine, and bandages. She knew Olivia might reject her help, just as she had before. She knew Olivia would tell her to leave, to mind her own business, to pretend none of this was happening, but Sophia's conscience wouldn't allow her to walk away. Carrying the basin and first aid supplies, she climbed the stairs, her heart pounding harder with every step. She didn't know how Olivia would react, but she had to try. When she reached the door, she pushed it open gently. Soft, broken sobs filled the room. Olivia sat curled in the corner, arms wrapped around herself as though she could shield her body from the world. Strands of disheveled hair clung to her tear-streaked face, and fresh blood trickled from the corner of her split lip. Dark bruises bloomed across her skin like cruel reminders of the violence she endured. Sophia swallowed hard, biting back the tears that burned her own eyes. She had never seen anything so harrowing. At the sound of movement, Olivia's head snapped up, her swollen eyes locked onto Sophia's, and she hurriedly wiped her tears away, as though ashamed to be seen in such a state. "What are you doing here?" Olivia asked, her voice shaky, laced with exhaustion. Sophia hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. "Ma'am, I think you need to go to the hospital," she said, her worry evident in every syllable. "That's not necessary," Olivia muttered, shifting away. "Get out!" "But ma'am, you have so many bruises. Why are you so stubborn? I said get out!" Olivia snapped, her voice cracking under the weight of her own pain. "I don't need your pity." Sophia didn't move. She could see it, the walls Olivia had built, the armor she wore, all in a desperate attempt to convince herself that she was strong enough to bear this alone. So, instead of leaving, Sophia stepped closer and set the supplies down. "I'm not here out of pity," she said quietly. Olivia's eyes narrowed. "I'm here to help you," Sophia whispered, lifting the damp washcloth toward Olivia's wounded lip. "I don't need your help," Olivia yelled, shoving her away. Sophia stumbled back, hitting the floor, but she didn't retreat. She didn't run. Instead, she sat up and inched forward again, her voice gentle, unwavering. "I know you're in pain, Mrs. Olivia. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Please, let me help you." Olivia's breath hitched. "Asking for help isn't weakness," Sophia continued, her tone filled with quiet conviction. "We're only human, ma'am. We can't handle everything alone." The room seemed to close in around them. Then, slowly, Olivia's shoulders slumped. Her lips trembled, and the tears she had been holding back spilled over, one after another, until they turned into wrenching, heartbroken sobs. Sophia reached out once more, and this time, Olivia didn't push her away. Seizing the moment, Sophia gently pressed the warm cloth to Olivia's bleeding lip, wiping away the blood and, for the first time, offering comfort that wasn't immediately rejected. A silent promise passed between them. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Olivia let out a sharp breath, her body trembling slightly, but she didn't resist anymore. Sophia worked in silence, gently dabbing at Olivia's wounds, mindful not to cause her any more pain than she had already endured. Each touch was careful, precise, an unspoken reassurance that she was safe, at least for this moment. As Sophia applied antiseptic to the bruises marring Olivia's skin, she hesitated, then spoke softly. "Ma'am, why do you let him hurt you?" Olivia didn't answer. Sophia glanced up, studying the woman before her, the way her swollen eyes stared blankly at the floor, the way her fingers twisted together as if bracing for another blow. "So," she asked again, "why do you let Julian do this to you?" Olivia's breath hitched. For a long moment, she remained silent, but then, slowly, she lowered her head. "Because it's my fault," she murmured. Sophia's heart clenched. "How can this be your fault?" she asked, bewildered. Olivia swallowed hard. "Because I'm always jealous," she whispered. "I always suspect him. I keep nagging, questioning him, pushing him. Maybe I'm just too irritating, and that's why Julian hurts me." Sophia set down the bottle of antiseptic, her fingers curling into fists. "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "Ma'am, you have every reason to be upset. Mr. Julian is a cheater. You know it, I know it, and that's why you're always fighting with him, because you can't pretend it's not happening." Olivia's gaze lifted slightly, and Sophia saw the pain buried deep within her eyes. Pain she had been shouldering alone for far too long. "I know Julian has other women," Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "More than one, in fact. But maybe if I weren't like this, maybe if I were more patient, more understanding, maybe he wouldn't." "No," Sophia cut in, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not your fault that he's hurting you, Ma'am Olivia. He's the one who's doing wrong, and yet he still thinks he has the right to be violent." Olivia's lips trembled. "I understand why you're angry all the time," Sophia continued, her voice gentler now. "I get why you end up lashing out at me or at others. It's because you're carrying so much pain in your heart. But ma'am, you can't keep enduring this. You shouldn't. It's wrong for Mr. Julian to hurt you, and it's wrong for you to let him get away with it." Sophia's throat tightened. Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she held them back. "You need to fight back, Ma'am Olivia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A choked sob escaped Olivia's lips. And then, she wept. Not the silent, restrained tears of a woman used to swallowing her pain, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire frame. Sophia said nothing. She simply sat there, letting Olivia cry, letting her release the agony she had been forced to suppress for so long. And for the first time, Sophia felt something shift. For the first time, she sensed that a part of Olivia was finally waking up to the truth, that this wasn't her fault, that she didn't deserve this, that she couldn't keep living like this. When Sophia finished tending to Olivia's wounds, she gathered the medical supplies and prepared to leave. But just as she stood, Olivia reached out, her fingers brushing against Sophia's wrist. Sophia turned, startled, and then, "Thank you," Olivia whispered. Sophia froze. She hadn't expected that. A small, tired smile tugged at her lips. "You're welcome, ma'am," she replied softly. Then, making sure Olivia was in stable condition, Sophia quietly excused herself and left the room. But as she walked down the dimly lit hallway, she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. In the days that followed, Sophia noticed subtle yet undeniable changes in Olivia's behavior. If before, Olivia's gaze had been sharp with hostility, now, at times, she managed a faint, almost hesitant smile. The sharp retorts that once accompanied Sophia's offers of help grew less frequent, eventually disappearing altogether. Day by day, Olivia's guarded heart seemed to soften, the walls she had built slowly crumbling. And then finally they began to grow closer. Whenever Julian lashed out at Olivia, Sophia could no longer stand idly by. She intervened every time, stepping between them, shouting at him to back off. Once she even leveled a warning at him, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "If you don't stop assaulting her, you could end up in jail." Though Julian's expression had darkened with anger, it was clear he wasn't truly afraid. Yet for that night at least, he stopped. That moment marked a turning point. Olivia's demeanor towards Sophia changed completely. Where there was once distance, now there was warmth. Where there was once mistrust, now there was companionship. Sometimes they spent time in the kitchen together, finding solace in the simple act of cooking, a quiet kind of healing neither had expected. One afternoon, the scent of melted chocolate filled the air as they worked side by side, baking a fresh batch of cookies. Laughter echoed through the kitchen as they shared stories of childhood, exchanging snippets of happier times, moments untainted by pain. But then, just as Sophia wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek, Olivia's laughter faded. A shadow passed over her face. She grew quiet, thoughtful, then, softly, she spoke. "Thank you, Sophia. For so many years, you're the only one who's ever shown me real concern." Sophia stilled, touched by the quiet sincerity in Olivia's voice. She smiled gently. "There's a reason I ended up here, Ma'am Olivia," she said. "To help you see that you can still escape this." Olivia met her gaze, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "Did you go through something like this too?" she asked hesitantly. Sophia nodded, memories surfacing, memories she had long since buried. "Yes," she admitted. "I endured a life I didn't want for a long time, and then, one day, I found the courage to break free. After I finally escaped, I never regretted it, not even for a second. If I have one regret, it's only that I wish I had done it sooner." Olivia exhaled a shaky breath. "Lucky you," she murmured. "You're brave. I'm not. I've been so scared of losing Julian that I just put up with everything." Sophia's chest tightened. Before she could respond, Olivia hesitated, then changed the subject, her expression darkening. "By the way," she said carefully, "I overheard Julian and Alara talking the other night." Sophia's brows knitted together. "They're angry at you for interfering in our lives." "I'm worried, Sophia. I can sense it. Something bad is coming," Olivia admitted, her voice tinged with unease. A ripple of apprehension coursed through Sophia. "What do you mean, ma'am?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm not sure, but I know Julian well enough. When he's angry, he can be dangerous." Sophia swallowed, a cold shiver running down her spine. "Don't worry about me, ma'am," she said with quiet confidence. "I can take care of myself." But deep down, she knew better. Julian was violent, unpredictable, and if he or Alara ever made a move against her, she wouldn't hesitate to fight back. One morning, as the gentle hum of the washing machine filled the laundry area, Sophia worked quietly, sorting through clothes with practiced ease. The scent of detergent lingered in the air, mingling with the faint warmth of early sunlight streaming through the open window. She was focused on her task when she heard soft footsteps approaching. Looking up, she found Olivia standing nearby, a slight but noticeable smile gracing her lips. "Sophia, we're going somewhere tonight. I need you to get ready," Olivia said, her tone carrying an unusual lightness. Sophia paused, momentarily caught off guard. "Where are we going, ma'am?" she asked, curiosity sparking in her voice. "There's a business event," Olivia explained. "Julian and I were invited. My mother-in-law Alara will be attending as well. They want you to come along to assist with anything they might need." She hesitated briefly, then added, "Is that okay with you?" Sophia didn't need to think twice. "Of course, ma'am," she answered quickly, her excitement barely contained. It had been ages since she'd stepped beyond the confines of the house, let alone interacted with people outside of their small, suffocating world. She didn't mind that she would only be there to help. What mattered was that, for the first time in what felt like forever, she would get a change of scenery, even if it was only for one evening. That evening, after showering and changing into a fresh set of clothes, Sophia was unexpectedly invited into Olivia's room. She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, where her eyes immediately landed on the bed. Laid out before her was a stunning navy blue dress, its elegant simplicity accentuated by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. "That's what you'll wear to the event, Sophia," Olivia said with a warm smile. "I've only worn it once, and I'm sure it'll look great on you." Sophia's heart fluttered with a mix of surprise and unease. It felt strange to accept something so beautiful, something that clearly belonged to a different world than hers. But when she saw the sincerity in Olivia's eyes, she couldn't bring herself to refuse. She slipped into the dress, running her hands over the smooth fabric before turning toward the mirror. A small, unexpected smile played on her lips. It fit her perfectly. Before long, they departed. Sophia, Olivia, Julian, and Alara, stepping into the night that pulsed with city lights. Their destination was a grand upscale hotel. As they walked into the function room, the air buzzed with quiet conversations, the clinking of wine glasses, and the effortless grace of the city's elite. CEOs of large corporations gathered around tables adorned with crystal and gold, the ambiance exuding an air of wealth and power. Sophia barely had time to take it all in before a soft, soulful voice filled the room. A female lounge singer stood on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of dimmed lights, her voice laced with raw emotion as she performed a classic ballad. Sophia's breath hitched. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the performer. A deep, familiar ache stirred within her, a longing she had pushed aside long ago. Olivia noticed the way Sophia's expression shifted, the quiet yearning in her gaze. "Why do you look so captivated by her?" Olivia asked softly. Sophia smiled faintly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because, ma'am, I once wanted to be a singer too." Before Olivia could respond, a sharp, mocking laugh shattered the moment. "What did you just say, Sophia?" Alara scoffed, her voice laced with amusement. "You want to be a singer? How could a laundry worker possibly become one? Your voice is probably like a frog's." Julian snickered beside her. "Exactly, you said it yourself. If you think you're so talented, why don't you sing for us right now? Go on, show everyone what you've got." Sophia stiffened. Her eyes went wide and she quickly shook her head. "Oh, no, sir. I'm too shy," she said, her voice steady despite the tension curling in her stomach. "Sophia, you don't have to do what they say if you're uncomfortable," Olivia interjected firmly. But Julian and Alara were having too much fun. "Maybe you don't want to sing because you actually can't," Alara sneered, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. "You're just afraid to embarrass yourself." Their laughter echoed around the table, the sharp edges of their ridicule cutting deep. Sophia remained silent. She knew better than to argue. They weren't looking for an answer, they were looking for entertainment at her expense. But then something unexpected happened. Alara stood up, Sophia's stomach twisted as she watched Olivia's mother-in-law stride toward the stage. The lounge singer was just finishing her song when Alara took the microphone, her expression poised yet laced with condescension. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alara's voice rang out, smooth and practiced. "Forgive me for the interruption, but we have a very special guest here tonight." Sophia's blood ran cold. Alara continued, barely suppressing a mocking smile. "She's a laundry worker who proudly claims she dreams of being a singer. And because I am nothing if not generous, I want to help her achieve that dream, right here, right now." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Alara's finger pointed straight at her. "Let's welcome her, Sophia!" A hush fell over the room as the spotlight shifted. The lights in the function hall dimmed slightly, leaving only Sophia illuminated in its stark glow. Dozens of powerful men and women turned in their seats, their expectant gazes settling on her. Her pulse pounded. She could feel Olivia beside her, tense and uneasy. Then, in a barely audible whisper, Olivia leaned in. "You don't have to do this, Sophia." But instead of backing down, Sophia simply smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that held none of the fear Ilara had been hoping for. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and rose to her feet. With her chin lifted and shoulders squared, she walked toward the stage, her gaze locked onto Ilara's. A hush fell over the room as all eyes followed her. The air was thick with anticipation, whispers rippling through the crowd like distant waves. When Sophia reached the stage, Ilara extended the microphone toward her, feigning politeness. But as she did, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You deserve to be humiliated in front of everyone for meddling in our affairs, laundry girl." Sophia's fingers curled into a tight fist at her side, but she did not flinch. She did not waver. Instead, she took the microphone with steady hands and turned toward the pianist, walking over to him with quiet confidence. She bent down, whispering the name of the song she wanted to perform. The pianist met her gaze, his brows lifting in slight surprise, but he nodded and positioned his fingers over the keys. A moment later, the first notes rang out. The melody floated through the air, delicate yet commanding. The room fell into complete stillness. Then, Sophia began to sing. Her voice, gentle yet brimming with raw emotion, wove through the silence like a thread of gold. Every note carried weight, and every lyric bled honesty. Within seconds, she had captured the room, holding them spellbound. She dared to glance at Julian and Ilara. Shock twisted their features. Their smug amusement had vanished, replaced with disbelief. They had expected a disaster, expected her to crumble, but instead, she had transformed their cruelty into a moment of triumph. Across the room, Olivia sat frozen in her seat, her lips slightly parted, her expression unreadable. It was clear she had never imagined Sophia capable of something so breathtaking. A murmur spread among the guests. Some leaned toward each other, whispering excitedly. Others simply listened, entranced. And when the final note faded into silence, the room remained hushed for a long, breathless moment. Then, applause. Thunderous applause. It surged through the hall like a crashing wave, building and rising until the entire room was on its feet. Sophia stood there, chest rising and falling, taking it all in, but her attention remained fixed on two faces in particular, Julian and Ilara. Their expressions had darkened with thinly veiled rage. She knew what they were thinking. Their attempt to humiliate her had backfired spectacularly. Instead of shame, she had won admiration, and they hated it. But then, something else. A shift in the murmurs among the guests. Sophia's pulse stilled when she picked up on hushed conversations near the front tables. A few of the CEOs were exchanging glances, their voices just audible over the applause. Daniel Anderson's daughter? Her blood ran cold. One of the men, an older CEO, suddenly turned toward her with recognition flashing in his eyes. Then another, and another. One by one, executives from various companies began to bow their heads politely in her direction, their expressions shifting from curiosity to reverence. Panic surged through her veins. They knew. They had recognized her, not as Sophia, the laundry worker, but as the daughter of billionaire Daniel Anderson. Her breath hitched. Her father would find out. It was only a matter of time. Ahead she could think, her body moved on instinct. She turned and hurried off the stage. "Sophia! Wait!" Olivia's voice rang out, but Sophia didn't stop. The weight of too many eyes, too many whispers, too many dangerous possibilities crashed down on her. She pushed past the stunned guests, her heart pounding in her chest, until she finally reached the exit. Stepping into the cool night air, she wasted no time. She hailed the first taxi she saw. The ride back to Olivia's house was silent, her thoughts racing at an unbearable speed. By the time she reached the estate, her hands trembled as she fumbled with the key, finally pushing the door open. She rushed to her room, her mind a chaotic mess. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she struggled to steady her breathing, but the fear only tightened its grip. If people knew who she was, if her father found her. Her fingers clenched the bed sheets before she suddenly stood, crossing the room in hurried steps. She grabbed her suitcase. She had to leave. Without hesitation, she began pulling out clothes, stuffing them inside, her hands moving quickly, desperately. But before she could zip the suitcase closed, the distant roar of an approaching car engine sent a chill down her spine. She froze. The sound grew louder, closer, until it came to an abrupt stop right outside the house. A sharp knock echoed through the front door, and for the first time in years, true fear coursed through her veins. Seconds later, the front door downstairs burst open, slamming against the wall with a force that rattled the entire house. Heavy footsteps stormed inside, then came Olivia's voice, furious, raw, shaking with rage. "How dare you bring your mistress to that event, Julian? You have no shame at all." Her words cut through the air like a blade, laced with years of pent-up anger. Julian's voice, sharp and dismissive, shot back at her. "What's your problem? You have no right to tell me who I can bring to that event." Sophia, who had just stepped out of her room, froze at the top of the stairs, eyes widening as the scene unfolded below. Olivia stood her ground, her fists clenched at her side. "Julian, I've put up with you for years," she spat, her voice trembling. "I've ignored your cheating countless times, swallowed my pride, played the obedient wife, but bringing your mistress right in front of my face, you think I'm going to stand here and take that?" Julian scoffed. "You act like you have a choice." "I do," Olivia snapped, "and I'm done." Before Julian could respond, Ilara stepped forward, her voice dripping with authority. "Hey, Olivia, stop shouting at my son!" But Olivia turned on her in an instant, eyes blazing. "No, you stop enabling him, Ilara," she fired back. "You're the reason Julian thinks he can cheat and get away with it. You taught him that women should endure whatever men throw at them. Well, I'm done enduring," Ilara gasped, taken aback by the outburst. Sophia clutched the banister, her heart hammering. She had never seen Olivia like this, so utterly furious, so unwilling to back down. Olivia turned back to Julian, her breathing heavy. "Listen to me," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm done letting you treat me like I don't matter. I have turned a blind eye to all your affairs for too long, let you humiliate me in ways no woman should ever tolerate, but not anymore." Julian smirked. "Really? You're done?" He took a step closer, tilting his head mockingly. "I know you, Olivia. You can't live without me." But this time, Olivia didn't waver. She lifted her chin, her voice unwavering. "That's what you think," she whispered, her words carrying more weight than a scream. "But now, I really can." And before Julian could react, her hand flew up. The sound of the slap cracked through the room like a gunshot. Julian's head snapped sideways from the force of it, a stunned silence swallowing the space. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, his expression twisted with fury, and before anyone could stop him, he struck her back. The slap sent Olivia stumbling, one hand flying to her burning cheek. But it wasn't fear that overtook her features. It was pure, unfiltered rage. Sophia's breath hitched, her body tensing as she moved to intervene. But Olivia was already gone. Before anyone could blink, she bolted toward the kitchen. For a brief second, confusion clouded Julian's and Ilara's faces. Then, Olivia reappeared. A large kitchen knife gleamed in her grasp. Ilara shrieked. Sophia's stomach dropped. Julian took an instinctive step back, his cocky demeanor vanishing in an instant. Olivia raised the blade between them, her hands steady, her breathing calm. "Panicking now, Julian?" she taunted, her voice eerily composed. "Try hurting me again, and I'll make sure you never wake up." Julian swallowed. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. "I'm sick of your abuse," Olivia continued, her grip tightening. "I'm sick of your affairs. I'm sick of being a fool for you." "Olivia," Julian started, his voice suddenly gentle, suddenly careful. "Put the knife down." She laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "Don't give me orders." Ilara, who had been frozen in place, finally found her voice. "Olivia, dear, let's be reasonable." "Shut up, Ilara," Olivia snapped, the knife still steady in her hand. Ilara flinched. Julian lifted his hands, trying to stay calm. "Let's talk about this." Olivia's expression hardened. "No, we're past talking," she whispered. "If you still have any sense of decency, you'll get out of this house, and you'll take your mother with you." The room hung in thick silence. Then, Julian's jaw clenched. Sophia held her breath. Would he fight back? Or would he finally understand that Olivia wasn't afraid of him anymore? Olivia's grip on the knife tightened as she took a step forward, her voice trembling with fury. "There's nothing left to discuss," she spat, her breath ragged. "Go enjoy your mistress. Get out and take that meddling mother of yours with you." Julian stood motionless, his usual arrogance stripped away. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "But know this," Olivia continued, her voice sharp as steel. "I won't stop until you're rotting in jail for what you've done to me. Your abuse, your cheating, you'll pay for every single thing, Julian." Her words hit like a hammer. Julian's jaw clenched, his face twisted with fury, but beneath it, Olivia saw what she had never seen before. Fear. He said nothing. Instead, he reached for Ilara, gripping her arm tightly, and stormed toward the door. Sophia watched as Ilara struggled against his grasp, sputtering protests. But Julian didn't slow down. He yanked her outside, and a second later the front door slammed shut behind them. Silence. Then, Olivia's knees buckled. The knife slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering against the floor with a metallic clang. A shudder racked her body, and before she could stop them, the tears she had held back for so long finally broke free. Silent at first, then uncontrollable. Sophia rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside Olivia. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around her, holding her tight. For a long moment, Olivia simply cried, years of pain, humiliation, and betrayal pouring out of her all at once. Sophia didn't say a word. She only held her, letting her feel something she hadn't felt in years: relief. Eventually, Olivia pulled back slightly, her tear-filled eyes meeting Sophia's. There was exhaustion in them, but also something else: freedom. Sophia gently helped Olivia to her feet and guided her to the sofa. A moment later, she returned with a glass of water, pressing it into Olivia's hands. Olivia took a sip, exhaling shakily. "I'm so proud of you, ma'am," Sophia murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You finally fought back." Olivia let out a weak chuckle, shaking her head. "But what happened at the event?" Sophia asked hesitantly. Olivia's expression darkened. She placed the glass down, rubbing her temples. "After you left, I was about to leave too, but then, right in front of everyone, a woman walked up to Julian and kissed him." Sophia's stomach twisted. "I knew her, Sophia. She's one of our clients. The one he always swore was just a friend. I saw the way he looked at her, the way she looked at him, and I just lost it." Olivia exhaled deeply, as if the memory alone was exhausting. "But in a way, I'm glad it happened." She leaned back against the couch. "It's about time everything ended between me and Julian." A long silence settled between them. The weight of the night hung heavy in the air. Then, Olivia turned to Sophia, her gaze sharper now. "Sophia," she said carefully, "I want you to be honest with me." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "At the event, after you sang, why did those COs bow to you?" Olivia's voice was quiet but firm. "Who are you really?" Sophia froze. Her fingers curled around the fabric of her dress. She had hoped to keep her truth hidden, to live as an ordinary girl in a world that demanded she be anything but. But now, there was no more hiding. Not from Olivia. She lowered her eyes, inhaling deeply before whispering the truth. She told Olivia everything. How she had spent her whole life suffocating under the weight of her father's expectations. How he had refused to let her chase her dream of singing, molding her into the perfect heiress instead. How, desperate for freedom, she had run away, choosing to live in disguise as a laundry worker just to experience what it was like to be normal. And finally, she revealed her last secret. Who she really was. The daughter of billionaire Daniel Anderson. A name that carried power, influence. A name that had made those CEOs bow to her without hesitation. When she finished, she hesitated before whispering, "I'm sorry, ma'am." Olivia. Olivia blinked, startled by the shift. "I know I deceived you by pretending to be a laundry worker," Sophia continued, her voice filled with remorse. "But my intentions were never bad. I just wanted to be someone who could make her own choices, even if just for a little while." For a long moment, Olivia didn't speak. Then, she smiled softly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Sophia." Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. Olivia reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "If anything," she murmured, "I should be the one thanking you." Sophia frowned. "Thanking me?" Olivia nodded. "You taught me how to fight back, how to take back my life. I don't think I would have had the courage to do what I did tonight if you hadn't been here." Sophia's chest tightened. "Thank you, Sophia," Olivia whispered, her gratitude raw and real. Sophia felt her throat tighten, warmth spreading through her. Then, for the first time that night, they both smiled, and without hesitation, they embraced. Two women who had both found their strength, at last. Relief washed over Sophia like a gentle tide, soothing the lingering ache in her heart. Olivia was finally free. Free from the chains of a man who had never truly cherished her. Free to begin anew, without the weight of betrayal pressing down on her shoulders. It was a new beginning. The next morning, Sophia and Olivia woke early, sharing breakfast at the quiet dining table. Though the tension from the previous night had lessened, Sophia could still see traces of exhaustion in Olivia's face, the remnants of a storm not easily forgotten. She didn't push Olivia to talk. Some wounds needed silence to heal. But before either of them could finish their meal, the sudden chime of the doorbell echoed through the house. Olivia looked up. "Serena, please check who it is," she requested, her voice calm but wary. The housekeeper nodded and disappeared down the hall. A few seconds later, the soft murmur of voices reached their ears. Then, footsteps, heavy, determined. Sophia barely had time to process the sudden shift in atmosphere before Mr. Daniel Anderson strode into the room. Her breath hitched. Serena followed closely behind him, her face creased with anxiety. Sophia gripped the edge of the table as her father's piercing gaze locked onto her. He looked at her. "Sophia," he said, his voice low but tight with restrained fury. His fingers closed around her arm in a firm grip. "You're coming home, now. Enough with this childish escapade." Sophia stiffened. "I'm not going back, Dad," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. "Leave me alone." His eyes darkened. "If someone hadn't told me you performed at an event last night, I wouldn't even have found you. What are you doing here? Why are you running away from your responsibility to our family?" Sophia inhaled sharply, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Don't you get it?" she shot back. "I'm not happy at home anymore." Mr. Anderson's expression hardened. "How can you say that? Do you have any idea how many people would kill for your life?" His voice was thick with disbelief. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "That's exactly the problem, Dad," she said, her voice trembling but not with fear, with raw, unfiltered emotion. "You think my life is some grand prize everyone else wants, but have you ever stopped to ask if it's what I want?" A sharp silence fell between them. "I'm not some trophy to be displayed in the world you built," she continued, her hands clenched into fists. "I'm not a robot you can program to follow your every command. I'm your daughter." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to go on. "But that doesn't mean you own me." Mr. Anderson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Taking a deep breath, Sophia pressed forward, her heart pounding with each word. "Why do you insist on controlling every part of my life? Why do you refuse to see me as a person instead of an asset? Don't you realize that's why Mom and Clara left?" The moment the words left her mouth, the tension in the room became suffocating. Her father's expression flickered, just for a moment, a crack in the armor. "You don't understand, Sophia," he finally said, his voice quieter. Sophia let out a shaky breath. "No, Dad. You're the one who doesn't understand." Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. "If you really love me, let me live my life the way I want," she whispered, her voice raw. "If I do come home one day, it won't be because you force me to. It'll be because I choose to." For the first time in her life, she saw something unfamiliar in her father's gaze. Not anger, not disappointment, but hesitation. A tense silence filled the house. Even Olivia held her breath. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Anderson exhaled. The fight in his shoulders seemed to ease, not in defeat, but in something else. Understanding. Out another word, he turned and walked away. The sound of the front door closing behind him was deafening. Sophia stood frozen in place, her body rigid from the weight of the confrontation. Then, as if the dam inside her had finally broken, she collapsed into sobs. Tears poured freely, unchecked and unrestrained. She barely registered Olivia rushing to her side, wrapping her in a warm, steady embrace. "Sophia," Olivia murmured, her voice filled with quiet pride. "I'm so proud of you." Sophia clung to her, the weight of years of unspoken pain finally lifting from her chest. She had done it. She had stood up for herself. And for the first time in her life, she was free. A few days passed, each one stretching out longer than the last, marked by an absence that Sophia couldn't ignore. Her father hadn't returned. Despite the defiance she had shown during their last encounter, a dull ache of guilt settled in her chest. The words she had hurled at him replayed in her mind over and over again. Had she been too harsh? Had she wounded him beyond repair? She didn't know. And that uncertainty weighed on her. On crisp morning, as sunlight filtered through the trees, Sophia and Olivia sat on the side porch, sipping tea and chatting idly. It was one of the first moments of peace Sophia had felt in days. Then, the rumble of an approaching car shattered the tranquility. Sophia stiffened. A sleek black luxury car rolled up to the house and came to a smooth stop at the front gate. The door opened, and out stepped Mr. Anderson. Sophia's heart pounded. He hesitated at the gate, his posture rigid yet uncertain, so unlike the commanding presence she was used to. Olivia squeezed Sophia's hand gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's up to you whether to send him away or let him in." Then, with quiet grace, Olivia stood and disappeared into the house, leaving Sophia alone to face the moment. For a long second, Sophia did nothing. Then, with a deep breath, she rose and walked toward the gate, fingers trembling slightly as she unlatched it. Her father met her gaze as she stepped aside, silently inviting him in. She led him toward the porch, keeping a measured distance between them. "What are you doing here, Dad?" she asked, her voice guarded. "If you've come to drag me home again, you're wasting your time." Mr. Anderson shook his head. "I'm not here to force anything, Sophia," he said quietly. Sophia frowned, caught off guard by the absence of anger in his voice. For the first time, she noticed something unfamiliar in his expression. Regret. He exhaled, the weight of his next words visible in his posture. "Sophia, I came to apologize." She blinked, barely processing the words before he continued. "I've been replaying everything you said to me that day," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion, "and I've realized just how much I've failed you, how little I've truly understood you, how many people I've hurt, you especially." His eyes glistened. Sophia felt her own tears welling up. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She was overwhelmed. "I know I can't change the past," he went on. "I can't undo the way I controlled your life, the way I dismissed your dreams. I can't take back all the times I made you feel trapped." He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "But there's one thing I can do right now." He met her eyes. "I can tell you that I'm sorry. I truly am. And I need you to know that." A single tear slipped down his cheek. That was it. The dam inside Sophia broke. A sob tore from her lips as she stepped forward, the years of pain, resentment, and longing unraveling all at once. For the first time in so many years, she reached for him first. "Dad," she choked out, wrapping her arms around him. "Thank you." He pulled her in tightly, his hold firm yet tender, as if afraid she might slip away again. "Come home whenever you want, honey," he whispered. "I won't pressure you. Our door is always open." Sophia squeezed him tighter, her heart swelling with something she hadn't expected. Joy, relief, forgiveness. And for the first time in a long time, she felt whole. At last, the fear that had once gripped her was gone. For the first time, she stood in her father's embrace, not as a burden, not as an obligation, but as a daughter truly loved. And finally, she felt the warmth of a father's love, the kind that had nothing to do with expectations or control, but everything to do with acceptance. A few months later, Sophia returned home, but this time she was no longer seen as a mere puppet. Bound by duty and expectations, Emma Anderson had finally set her free, to be herself, to live on her own terms. She remained an integral part of the Anderson family business, continuing her role as an heir and manager. Yet she never let go of her passion. Music still had a place in her life. Occasionally she stepped onto the stage, no longer weighed down by fear or hesitation. And when she sang, her father was often there, sitting in the audience, not as an obstacle, but as her proudest supporter. Sophia saw it in his eyes, the admiration, the pride, the love. It was a sight that filled her heart in ways she had never imagined. Meanwhile, Olivia stood victorious in her battle against Julian. Despite the challenges, she refused to be silenced. She fought, she endured, and in the end, justice was served. Julian was convicted and imprisoned for his crimes, proof that no one had the right to mistreat or diminish another person, especially a spouse. Through it all, Sophia and Olivia remained unwavering friends. Once they had been two women trapped in lives they never chose, one shackled by a father's control, the other by an abusive husband. But in the end, they found their strength. They chose to fight. They chose to reclaim their lives. And now, they lived freely, Sophia embracing both her dreams and her responsibilities. Olivia standing tall, unburdened by fear. Most importantly, they lived with no regrets. Through everything, Sophia had come to understand one undeniable truth. Freedom wasn't simply about running away. It was about standing your ground. It was about choosing yourself. It was about fighting for the happiness you deserved. And this time, she had won. And that's the story of Sophia and Olivia. Two women who refused to be defined by their circumstances. Sophia found the courage to stand up for her dreams, and Olivia took back the power she thought she had lost. Their journey reminds us that true freedom isn't about escaping, it's about choosing yourself, standing your ground, and fighting for the life you deserve. So if you're ever caught between fear and the life you truly want, remember this: you have the strength to break free. You have the power to rewrite your own story. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories, and let us know in the comments, what does freedom mean to you?